Hello, I'm Gail Fisher Stewart, a retired priest in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington and a member of the Crummell Cooper chapter of the Union Episcopalians. And welcome to Freedom School number 11, Women in Project 2025. It's more than abortion. And it really is how Project 2025 affects each and every woman and girl in this country is more than abortion. However, that issue, abortion, is such an emotional issue that folks who use it to stir up those emotions know exactly what they are doing. I'll discuss the abortion issue and go even further because when it comes to women and girls, Project 2025 gets to the heart of the question of whether or not women and girls are full citizens of this country. This session was originally developed for the Episcopal Church women of the Diocese of Washington. But as we go along, the discussion is for anyone who is a woman or girl, or anyone who knows women and girls. There are also a couple of videos. However, I'll skip over those slides and will send the links when this is published to YouTube. If you would like the slideshow presentation that will include the video links, you can email me or request it in the comments. This session is broken down into 3 parts. Part 1, what if? Right now, as we talk about Project 2025, it is not a reality, not yet, but can become a reality if a conservative administration takes over after the November 5th election. Part 2 deals with the reality. Are there aspects of the Heritage Foundation's playbook, which is what most people think about when they hear Project 2025? Are there aspects of that playbook already with us? And part 3, if a conservative administration is successful in taking over the reins of government, how will they put Project 2025 in play? One thing you will realize is that the people intent on turning this country into an autocracy don't have to make anything up. They will use the U.S. Constitution and the laws already on the books. So let's begin with some questions to guide this presentation to get you thinking. And again, when you go back, you can stop this wherever you are and look at each and every one of these questions. But the one that will guide this is the first one. And because it is the crux of the issue as it relates to Project 25. It is more than abortion and relates directly to this question. Are women rather, full citizens of this country? Now, we might give an enthusiastic yes. However, do full citizens have control over their own bodies? We have to remember that with the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was ratified in 1920, women were given the right to vote. To ratify that amendment, states had to vote on it, and only men had the right to vote. If women were full citizens, would they need to be given the right to vote? And if they were given the right to vote, who held that control? Who held the power to give women that right? You know, these are not frivolous questions because as we look at some of the recent decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court, they often couch their decisions with the term original intent. The original intent of the framers of the Constitution, the original intent of the so-called founders of this country. In the U.S. Constitution, as originally written and adopted, women were not included as citizens. Native Americans were not included as citizens. And Africans, Black people, were considered 3/5 of a human being, but only for the purposes of representation in Congress. How many representatives states were permitted in the House of Representatives. And when it comes to abortion, abortion is nowhere in the U.S. Constitution. Therefore, the justices surmise that it was not the original intent of the framers of the United States Constitution to include abortion as a constitutionally guaranteed right. Why would it have been a right for women when women were not thought to be citizens, people who had a say in the running of this country, or who had a say over their bodies? Women were the property of men. And I need you to hold on to that thought. So, what if Project 2025 becomes a reality because a conservative administration wins in November? This session is not for or against abortion. It is about whether or not women and girls have a say about what happens to them, to us as full citizens of this country. We've already seen women die as a result of medical personnel not being able to take necessary medical action for fear of arrest or losing their medical licenses. And this is why there are medical procedures that have absolutely nothing to do with abortion, but use the same procedures and medical implements. Many women have a D&C, dilation and curettage, for gynecological issues, and D&Cs are used when there are miscarriages, and yet women can be denied these life-saving procedures because of the threat of jail, fines, or medical personnel losing their licenses. Project 2025, the Conservative Presidential Transition Project, is part of the Heritage Foundation's plan to take control of this country and to implement its conservative values. Now, some of you may have also heard about Trump 47, that it's different. It's not really. It's the Cliff Notes version of Project 2025. And the Heritage Foundation has been around since 1973 and has been guiding, influencing conservative presidents since that time. The current version of the playbook, which again is what most people think about when they think of Project 2025, is its 11th iteration. Yes, it's been going on right under our noses. But what if the plan, the entire project in its totality, is implemented? What happens to women? Again, are women full citizens? Trump has already said that women who have abortion and doctors who perform them should be punished. Are women full citizens? Most of you have heard by now the political issues surrounding the current candidate for North Carolina Governor, Mark Robinson. But before those issues kind of got stirred up, before we heard him really in the media, he made the statement that abortion should not be permitted for women who can't keep their skirts down. Now, what's interesting is that 33 years ago, he and his girlfriend, who is now his wife, had an abortion. Was that because his girlfriend, now wife, could not keep her skirt down? And then he says that when a woman becomes pregnant, her body is not her body anymore. Whose body is it? The fetus or the government? Because for him, the woman or girl has no control. Now, Mark Robinson is not the only person who believes that way. And the proposals in Project 2025 are written with those beliefs in mind. Should a 12 or 13-year-old rape or incest victim be made to carry a pregnancy to term? Now, I said there are a couple of videos, and there's a video that goes with this, and I'll send the link. And after you watch it, what are your thoughts? Project 2025 sees the primary role of women as being wives, subordinate to men, their husbands, and as mothers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if that is what a woman wants. But should that be forced on any woman or girl? And it wouldn't be if women were full citizens with the right to make decisions about their bodies. People who are full citizens don't have to be given rights by a group of people who deem themselves in control. And there's also a video of NFL Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butler at his giving his commencement speech at Benedictine College, which is a co-ed college. And as you watch it later on, I want you to critique his message. What would you tell women and girls? But he said that women should need to lean into your vocation as a wife and mother, that all that time you spent getting an education, getting those degrees, should be subordinate to being a wife and a mother. But what if? What if? How many women and girls track their menstrual cycles using smartwatch applications? In 2022, the White House warned that should Project 2025 become a reality, those records could be legally seized and used against women. It can't be done now. But again, what if? And the Lincoln Project produced a video to raise that exact issue. That's the what if. That's the what if. What might, what could happen if a conservative administration claims or reclaims the White House in November? Now, this is not a doomsday projection. It's in Project 2025. But what is the reality? How have women and girls already been negatively affected? What might have been occurring right under our noses, but we have failed to get the memo? Remember, in the Declaration of Independence, it is written, all men are created equal and are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And not all men were included in that document. Only certain men, and again, no women, no indigenous people, and no Black people. In the Constitution, the same groups were omitted and had to be added, had to be given their rights. And so take a look at these issues that many women deal with and require medical care, require medical treatment. And that medical care, that medical treatment just might be affected under conservative administration. We've had the what if, but what is the reality? What has already occurred? And is there something else going on? As we review and critique Project 2025, there are both secular and biblical underpinnings. Remember, there are folks who believe this country is or should be a Christian nation. Somehow we should be guided by biblical values. But as many of us know, the Bible is not always kind to women. It has been used to subjugate women to men. You know, most of us, most of you have read the Gospel of John, the 4th chapter, verses 1 through 17. And if you have one of those Bibles that has subtitles, this portion of scripture is titled, Jesus Talks to the Samaritan Women. Now, we know, we have been taught, that there was friction between the Jews and the Samaritans, although they were cousins. And then in this section of scripture, why couldn't it be titled The Samaritan Woman Talks to Jesus? After all, she was on her home turf. We've also been taught to see this as Jesus crossing barriers and boundaries to deal with people who are outsiders, that he recognized the woman as a human being. We also, as he is speaking with her, we hear that he brings up that she has been married 5 times and is now living with a man not her husband. Now, how have you been taught to understand this? Could it be that because of the role of women in the society was one in which she needed a man to be somebody, that she needed to be under the cover of a man, not to be destitute, that perhaps these husbands died And she needed to keep finding a man to avoid poverty. I mean, these men could have been brothers, and when one brother died, she was passed to the other brother because she was property. And Jesus also tells her, as he's speaking with her, to go get your husband. I mean, does that mean that she cannot understand what Jesus has to say to her without a man to interpret? I mean, this woman's agency has been denied. She's been shown in a negative light. And how she and other women are shown in the Bible leads those in this society who do not see women as full human beings to continue to deny rights to women. And it will be done with the all too frequent phrase, the Bible says. Plus, in all the stories of women and their need to have children to be valued, have you ever heard that it could have been the man who was the problem? Why did the woman's womb always have to be open? And then, if sex is critical to reproduction, women need to have children to be valued. Why is it that everything associated with the woman's body and that sex act is somehow unclean? If you are Episcopalian, you might remember when we had a rite it was called the Churching of Women in the 1928 Book of Common Prayer. It was a liturgy for the purification or churching of women after childbirth, together with the presentation in church of the child. Now, this rite was based on the ritual purification of Mary and the presentation of Christ in Luke, the second chapter. We also know that Thomas Cranmer, the author of the original Book of Common Prayer, called this 1549 rite the Order of the Purification of Women. And in 1552, it later became the Thanksgiving of Women after childbirth, commonly called the Churching of Women. And in the 1979 Book of Common Prayer, we find that we avoid any hint of ritual impurity. And the rite is replaced with one called a thanksgiving for the birth or adoption of the child. But a woman, before she could come back to church, had to be purified. What does that tell us about the role of women? The reality in terms of reproductive rights, of which abortion is only one, is that if abortion is outlawed throughout this country, abortions will still occur and women will die. That will be the outcome of making abortions illegal throughout this land. And we know that because women have died receiving illegal abortions. Many of you watching this remember when abortions were illegal throughout the land, and know women who still had abortions, back alley abortions, abortions conducted on kitchen tables, abortions performed without anesthesia, abortions of women performed on themselves. And so we know a story. A woman lies dead on a motel room floor, her naked body hunched over a blood-soaked towel. She died alone, abandoned by her lover after a failed self-induced abortion in 1964. Her name was Jerry Santoro. But when a shocking photo of her then identified body was published in a national magazine, Jerry became the defining symbol of abortion rights movement in this country. Jerry Santoro was 28 years old when she died. She was 18 years old when she met Sam Santoro, the man who would become her husband, at a bus stop in Massachusetts. Even for the early 1950s, they married quickly, and the new Mrs. Santoro soon showed signs of physical abuse. The couple stayed together for years and had two daughters. She briefly moved to California before she fled back to her childhood home, taking the girls with her because of that relationship. She had a relationship with another man and became pregnant. And it was in her desperation that her husband would find out that she was pregnant that led her to end the pregnancy. A former detective said her boyfriend sought advice and borrowed tools from a friend whose wife was a doctor and told him that he could perform the abortion himself. When the procedure did not go right, he fled before later turning himself in to police. When abortions are illegal, this will happen. Women will die. The reality is this, and it is detailed in Michelle Goodwin's book, Policing the Womb, Invisible Women and the Criminalization of Motherhood. But we know that sex education has been suppressed. And there have been cases where abortion has been outlawed, where brain dead women have been forced to gestate fetuses, and both the women's body and the fetus have continued to deteriorate until both are dead or a seriously compromised baby is delivered. Controlling women's bodies as property of men is as old as the Bible and continues today. History tells us of eugenics, where there was a search for the perfect white body, the perfect white female body, and the control and abuse of Black women's bodies during slavery and beyond. J. Marion Sims is known as the father of gynecology, and his statue in New York was removed because the truth came out of how he abused Black enslaved women to perfect gynecological procedures to be used specifically on white women. There was this condition, vesicovaginal fistula, which was a catastrophic complication of childbirth among 19th century American women. And Sims used enslaved Black women, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, to practice his gynecological surgeries, really butcheries. These experiments were conducted without permission and without anesthesia. As we look at abortion in this country, it was not an issue until white male doctors, of course, white and male and doctors, realized that Black women as midwives were not only delivering babies, but were also performing abortions. And this could not be because gynecology could not be a valued profession if so-called untrained, unprofessional Black women were performing the procedures. In Birmingham, Alabama, there is a museum curated by Michelle L. Broder. It acknowledges the women of gynecology, the enslaved women, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. And the iron figures were created by Michelle to tell the story of these women. The reality is this: women in this country still operate under a system of patriarchy. Many of us remembered when a married woman could not get a bank account without her husband's signature, when credit cards that had been issued in a single woman's name after she married were automatically reissued in her husband's name. They came Mrs. and her husband's name. We remember when a married woman could not use birth control without the permission of the husband, and single woman could not use birth control at all. We remember when women could not get a mortgage in her name, and even if she made more money, when a married couple took out a mortgage, the husband's name was listed first. Women were the property of men. And listen to this. A husband could sue the other man if his wife had an affair or if his wife was raped. He could sue for the loss of consortium, the loss of the ability to have sex with his wife. And spousal rape was not against the law until 1993. There were also coverture laws. Coverture is a long-standing legal practice that is part of our colonial heritage. Though Spanish and French versions of coverture existed in the New World, United States coverture is based in English law. Coverture held that no female person had a legal identity. At birth, a female baby was covered by her father's identity, and then when she married, by her husband's identity. The husband and wife became one. Remember the Bible? And that one was the husband. As a symbol of this subsuming of identity, women took the last names of their husbands. They were femme coverts, covered women. They had no rights as women. How many of you women, when you married, or women who, when they married, vowed to obey their husbands in the marriage rite? You do understand that men did not pledge to obey their wives. How many women were or are or have been given in marriage? This was or is a transfer of property, the woman from the father to the husband. It relates back to coverture. It is not a cute tradition. All of this, from the time of the Bible up to today, is about patriarchy. And Project 2025 wants to return women to the state of property. A 16-year-old male, consider this, a 16-year-old male, boy, teenager, and a 15-year-old female teenager. They are in love and they experiment with sex and are caught, or the teenage girl ends up pregnant. The 16-year-old male is charged with statutory rape because the law says the female, the girl, cannot consent, not because of immaturity, but rather her body is not hers. She belongs to her father, and she cannot give away what belongs to her father. Project 2025 also wants to revive an 1893 law, the Comstock Act. This act was to regulate or to eliminate vice, materials considered immoral, from being transported via the post office. Anthony Comstock was the U.S. Postal Inspector for which the act is named. If this act is revived, it would make the transportation of medicines and instruments used for abortions illegal. However, as you know, as we previously discussed, there are many gynecological conditions and procedures that use the very same medicines and instruments that have nothing to do with abortion. How many women use birth control pills to regulate their periods as opposed to using it for conception? How many women have had D&Cs after a miscarriage, not an abortion? This law would cause physicians to second guess themselves in providing needed medical care. Again, it's all about patriarchy. You will see this in the 3 videos that come with this presentation. It's all about control of women's and girls' bodies as property of men. Yet beyond abortion, because we got to go beyond abortion, there's more than abortion. There are so many issues that affect the lives of women and girls that are included in Project 2025. Take a look at this list. How many? Which affect or could affect you or women and girls you know? So let's just Take a couple. Do you know a woman or girl with student loan debt? Under Project 2025, all student loan debt would be privatized, which means the main purpose of servicing the loans would be to make money, not to get you to pay off the loan. Project 2025 says that those with loans, people with loans who've taken out loans, would pay in perpetuity. That means forever. And it's already occurring. I've gathered data where people, just regular people, are paying $800 a month with only $8 going to the principal. And they've already been paying 10 to 15 years. They have actually paid the principal if the money had gone to the principal and not interest. Have you used Head Start for your children or know a woman who has? Under Project 2025, the Department of Education would be eliminated, and Head Start would be one of those programs that would be lost. What would also be lost are free meals for school children. They want to eliminate all of that. And are you a woman, or you know a woman who's on Medicaid or Medicare? Again, there would be a move to privatize both. Money for those who manage the programs and fewer benefits for those who need to use them. Do you know someone who is unhoused? Do you know a woman who is unhoused? Project 2025 would eliminate rapid rehousing that says give people housing first, then work on their issues or programs. That it is easier to deal with problems when you have somewhere to lay your head. But Project 2025 says, no, not going to do that. You need to clean yourself up first, and then perhaps you will be eligible for housing. Social Security benefits would be reduced for seniors and the disabled. And again, Social Security would be privatized. When things are privatized, capitalism creeps in, and it's about making money for those who service the programs. And then, this is something that you might find interesting. What we do know is that all of the so-called safety net programs that we have in this country benefit whites more than people of color. But you wouldn't know that listening to the pundits who want you to think differently, who use their propaganda of pointing to like welfare queens and people who don't want to work and folks who, who just want to use the government. Okay? We need to listen carefully. Are you a woman, or do you know a woman who's a veteran or any veteran? Under Project 2025, benefits will be slashed. Here you have people who have served this country. Project 2025 wants to reduce the benefits to people who have served this country. Are you, or do you know someone who's LGBTQIA? Their rights will be curtailed. There is a reason for this. Somehow, people think that this LGBTQIA agenda, as they call it, will force schools to out trans kids, and that would force kids to think about changing their sexual identity. And that's not what it's about. But if you listen carefully to what's being said, there is this agenda that goes to what are proper genders in this country. And it has to do with the concept of nuclear family. To the degree possible, the official family in this country would be the nuclear family, married men and women, man, woman, married, that's it, with birth children. And so this nuclear family would consist of two parents, a mother and a father, and their biological and sometimes adopted children living together in a single household. But how many of you have raised children at your own? How many of you were raised by people who were not related to you by birth? But under Project 2025, they want to configure a specific way that families are defined. And then in terms of racial equity, on day one of this conservative administration taking over, all terms such as sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, inclusion, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term like that will be deleted from every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, and piece of legislation that exists. All of those terms would go away. Would you or a woman of girl you know be affected? And why? Why is all this occurring? Why is this occurring? Why are we looking at eliminating housing and healthcare and business opportunities and education? Why? Because Trump in April 2024 articulated what the issue is. There's absolutely a bias against white people, and that's a problem. There's that belief in this country. Race undergirds Project 2025. And as we look at housing, how many of you remember or learned about redlining and restrictive racial covenants? Under Project 25, we could see that return because there is this belief that American homeowners and citizens know what is in the best interest of their neighborhoods and communities. What is that saying? Oh, it won't be in your face, but perhaps whole communities will go back to being all white because houses won't be sold to people of color. And so, how will this all occur? Just in case we see a conservative administration retake the White House in November, the law is already in place. The entire federal government would find itself under the control of the presidency, but it's already there. It's called unitary executive theory, and it comes from Article 2 of the Constitution. Every federal agency is already under the control of the president. You have three branches of government. You have the executive, right? You have the legislative, and you have judiciary. And so every federal agency is under the executive branch. The president has control. And so how would this control come into action? How would it come into play? It would be accomplished through executive orders signed by the president without any consultation with Congress. We've already heard Trump say, oh, you don't need Congress. But we already have executive orders. They are, in fact, the day-to-day fact of governing, but they have occurred without our knowing, unless there's a press conference. And we have had people of integrity who have not used those executive orders to their particular benefit. There will also be the creation of Schedule F. Thousands of jobs will be placed under Schedule F. Right now, we don't have Schedule F. Under Trump's first administration, he implemented Schedule F, but when Biden came in, he disbanded it. And what happens under Schedule F, there are thousands of jobs, and the people of these jobs will be reclassified, and they will have to sign a loyalty oath, a loyalty pledge to the president. Do you know a woman, or are you a woman who works for the federal government? How would that affect you? The thing about it is we can ensure equity for all. And, I find myself going, okay, this is a quote from Reagan, but it makes sense. And the quote is this: freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation. I mean, that's in Project 2025, Mandate for Leadership, the playbook. That's right there. And so if we want a country that works for everybody, we're going to have to fight for it. And we can fight for it on November 5th. The thing is, we're not going back. Women are not going back to being the property of men. We're not going back there. And so, what do we need to do? We're going to share this information. You're going to vote like your life depends on it, because it does. And you're going to vote at all levels, up and down the ballot, because there are things going on at the local level that we need to make sure support what we're doing at the top of the ballot. And then once our representatives, our legislators, the president is voted in, we're going to hold them accountable to the people who want a country that works for all. After all, we are the people. And again, as we conclude this Freedom School, thanks to Rick Gray of Steel Beach Post-Production LCC for all of the technical expertise. And let me remind you, the ball's in your court, the ball's in our court. Thank you for listening.